Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
Good morning and welcome to today's episode. I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and every day I get to share a piece of history that I think you'll find as fascinating as I do. On December 13th, 1972, Eugene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt completed humanity's final moonwalk. Cernan, the mission commander, would become the last human being to leave footprints on the lunar surface, a distinction he's held now for over 50 years. And here's what fascinates me about this moment. It was both the culmination of humanity's most outstanding exploratory achievement and the beginning of an abandonment we still haven't fully explained. We reached the moon, planted our flag, proved we could do the impossible, and then we simply stopped going. Understanding this requires holding multiple truths simultaneously. Apollo 17 was a triumph of human ingenuity and courage, a political casualty of shifting national priorities, and a question we're still trying to answer half a century later. All three are true. Picture this. It's early afternoon on the Sea of Serenity, though on the moon there's no real day or night in the way we experience them on Earth. Gene Cernan stands next to the lunar module Challenger, its ladder leading up to the small hatch that will take him away from this place forever. He's been out here for more than 7 hours on this third and final excursion, and he knows what's coming. He pauses at the base of the ladder. Behind him, the Taurus-Littrow Valley stretches out in stark grays and blacks, under an Earth that hangs perpetually in the same spot in the sky. He's collected samples, deployed scientific instruments, and driven the lunar rover farther than any previous mission. And now it's time to leave. What Cernan said in that moment has haunted space enthusiasts ever since. As I take man's last step from the surface, back home for some time to come, but we believe not too long into the future, I'd like just to say what I believe history will record, that America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow. He believed not too long into the future. It's been more than 50 years. Let me build the clock for you, because understanding why December 13th, 1972 became the last time requires seeing how we got there and what changed. Apollo 17 launched on December 7th, 1972, the only nighttime launch in the Apollo program. The three-stage Saturn V rocket lit up the Florida coast like a second sun at 12:33 in the morning. Cernan was the mission commander. Ronald Evans piloted the command module, America in lunar orbit, and Harrison Schmitt was the lunar module pilot who would walk on the surface with Cernan. Schmidt's presence was itself historically significant. He was a geologist with a PhD, the first and only professional scientist to walk on the moon. Under pressure from the scientific community, NASA had bumped Joe Engle and included Schmitt on this final mission. They landed in Taurus-Littrow on December 11th, choosing this location for its geological diversity. The valley offered access to both ancient highland rocks and evidence of relatively recent volcanic activity. Over 3 days, Cernan and Schmitt performed 3 moonwalks, totaling more than 22 hours. They drove the lunar rover 22 miles across the surface, collected 243 pounds of lunar samples, more than any other mission, and made one of the most exciting discoveries of the entire Apollo program when Schmitt found orange soil at Shorty Crater, initially hoping it was evidence of recent volcanic activity. It turned out to be ancient volcanic glass from the moon's early history. But the discovery demonstrated exactly why having a trained geologist on the surface mattered. By every measurable standard, Apollo 17 was the most successful lunar mission. They stayed longer, traveled farther, collected more samples, and conducted more sophisticated scientific experiments than any crew before them. And then they left, and no human has returned since. Here's what the evidence tells us about why we stopped. The Apollo program was always as much about Cold War politics as it was about exploration. President Kennedy's 1961 challenge to reach the moon before this decade is out was fundamentally a response to Soviet space achievements, Yuri Gagarin's orbit, the perception that America was losing the space race. Once we won that race with Apollo 11 in 1969, the political urgency evaporated. By 1972, the Vietnam War was consuming national attention and resources. The economy was struggling. Environmental issues, civil rights, urban problems, these demanded attention and money. NASA's budget had already been cut dramatically. 3 planned Apollo missions, 18, 19, and 20, had been canceled. The way I see this, President Nixon never really believed in the space program the way Kennedy had. The story goes that when Apollo 13 nearly ended in disaster in 1970, Nixon was so concerned about the political fallout that he initially tried to remove funding for Apollo 17 entirely. He was persuaded to allow one final mission, but only if it launched after the 1972 presidential election. They didn't want another potential disaster affecting his campaign. So Apollo 17 flew in December 1972, and that was that. But here's what troubles me about that explanation. Straightforward as it seems, it treats the abandonment of lunar exploration as if it were inevitable, as if budget pressures and shifting priorities fully explain why the wealthiest, most technologically advanced nation on Earth simply walked away from the most significant achievement in human exploration. We kept flying the space shuttle for 30 years. We've maintained a continuous presence on the International Space Station since 2000. We found money for wars, for tax cuts, for countless other priorities, but we couldn't find the resources or political will to return to the moon. I find myself thinking about what that says about us. The Apollo program cost roughly $280 billion in today's dollars over a decade. Expensive, yes. But compared to what? We spent trillions on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The 2017 tax cuts cost an estimated $1.5 trillion over 10 years. I'm not making an argument about whether those were good or bad decisions. That's not the point. The point is that the money was never really the obstacle. The obstacle was that, as a nation, we decided we'd proven what we needed to establish, accomplished what we'd set out to achieve, and that everything else could wait. Think about the position the Apollo 17 crew was in. They knew they were the last. NASA had already announced the cancellations. These men trained for years, risked their lives, pushed the boundaries of human capability, and were told, "This is it." Cernan has spoken about that feeling many times since. He wanted to believe it was temporary, that America would return not too long into the future. He spent the rest of his life, he died in 2017, waiting for someone else to make the trip he made in 1972. It never happened in his lifetime. Harrison Schmitt, the scientist-astronaut, later served as a U.S. Senator from New Mexico. He's still alive today, now in his late 80s. He's watched 50 years pass without a return. Ronald Evans, who orbited the moon alone in the command module while his crewmates explored the surface, died young in 1990, also without seeing anyone follow in their footsteps. We're still living with the consequences of that decision. For half a century, human space exploration has been limited to low Earth orbit. The space shuttle, the International Space Station, important work indeed, but nothing like the audacious leap to another world. An entire generation grew up knowing that humans once walked on the moon, but no longer do, a fact that's both inspiring and quietly tragic. The moon receded from being where we went to being where we used to go, and then to where we might go again someday. And now, finally, that someday is approaching. NASA's Artemis program aims to return humans to the lunar surface, with the current target of 2026 or 2027. The uncrewed Artemis 1 mission flew successfully in late 2022, exactly 50 years after Apollo 17 returned. Artemis 2 will carry astronauts around the moon. Artemis 3 is planned to land on the lunar surface, this time near the South Pole, where orbital mechanics allow more frequent launches than Apollo's equatorial approach. But here's the complexity. We're trying to return to the moon in a very different world than the one that first got us there. The Cold War competition that drove Apollo is gone. The political consensus that made it possible has fractured. The technological infrastructure we built in the 1960s, the massive Saturn V rockets, the launch facilities, the specialized knowledge, all of that had to be rebuilt from scratch because we let it atrophy. We're starting over in many ways, trying to recreate capabilities we once had and then deliberately abandoned. The great philosopher George Santayana wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." But I think there's a corollary we don't talk about as much. Those who remember the past without understanding why things happened are condemned to repeat not just the mistakes, but the same patterns of thinking that created them. We remember going to the moon. We celebrate the anniversary every year. But have we really understood what it meant that we stopped? This isn't just about space exploration, though that matters deeply. It's about what we're capable of as a civilization when we commit to something complex and then follow through, versus what happens when we achieve something remarkable and then walk away. Apollo 17 proved we could reach the moon. The 50 years since have proven something else, that maintaining a commitment to exploration, to pushing boundaries, to going places simply because they're hard, that's actually harder than getting there in the first place. When Cernan took that last step into the lunar module and closed the hatch behind him, he couldn't have known it would be the last time for 5 decades and counting. He believed, genuinely believed, that others would follow soon. That faith, that optimism about human ambition and capability, I think that matters. And the fact that we proved him wrong for 50 years, that matters too. Both things are true. Apollo 17 was a magnificent achievement, perhaps the finest moment of human exploration in the 20th century. And our failure to build on it, to maintain our presence, to keep reaching, that's one of the great disappointments of the half-century since. Gene Cernan's footprints are still there, preserved in lunar dust with no wind to erase them, no rain to wash them away. They'll be there for millions of years, marking the last place a human stood on another world. And they're waiting, as Cernan waited his entire life, for someone to come back. I'm Richard Backus, and this is the Daily History Chronicle. Tomorrow, we'll explore another moment that shaped our world. Until then, ask yourself, what dreams did we accomplish and then abandon? What capabilities did we develop and then let slip away? And if we return to the moon in the next few years, will we stay this time, or will the story simply repeat? Because that's what the last moonwalk teaches us, not just about our capacity to achieve the impossible, but about how hard it is to hold on to what we've achieved once the initial victory is won. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe. If you really enjoyed it, then please tell a friend. I hope you will join me again tomorrow for more of our shared history.